This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
We are back, and today on the Daily Leader, we're going to talk about something that I'm going to classify as kind of like an elusive Yeti. It's out there, and we kind of all know it's there, but we never seem to be able to catch it, at least for not very long, and that's our energy, man. So today, I want to talk about energy, like as
I love it.
a team, company, self, all those things. Why is it? We want to try and answer this question for you if you've ever felt this way. All right, so why is it that I can feel like I'm resting a lot and not gaining any energy, like not feeling restored, ready to go, rocking? So yeah, today we're going to spend some time on energy, how to renew it, what
I
that's
love
like.
it.
So tell me a little bit about that, Brad. Tell me, can you define energy first of all? Like what is it?
Yeah. I remember when early last year we were working through Spark, and that was a book that you had recommended to me.
Yep.
And we had these great conversations around the power of physical movement and how physical movement can transform the way that the mind and the emotions, I might even say spirit, for those of you who are awake and aware that you have a spirit. All right. Um, So you've got the mind, the emotions, the spirit, and the body, and we're trying to we're trying to deal with output, right? Our ability to do work. There's a lot of woo-woo definitions of energy, right? Like, Taylor, I love your energy, man. Or, I met this girl, she has the most amazing energy. Or, man, I didn't like the energy in that room or at that company or with those people. And it feels really nebulous and honestly just kind of weird.
Yeah.
But when we understand energy simply as just the capacity to do work, it's what is available for us to actually accomplish tasks and things that we have to get done.
Right.
And I think that simple, plain definition of energy is a really easy place for us to start to build an understanding around how we get work done, how we uh, put energy out, and how we renew our energy as well.
Right. Totally agree. Okay. So energy defined is our capacity to do work. I like it. Simple. But then if it's simple, it's certainly not easy to conjure that elusive energy
No,
sometimes. At least if you're like me. I can
no.
go into the weekend and be like, okay, great. Super excited. I'm going to get some rest. And then
Mhm.
Monday, I'm going to come rocking. And I get to Monday and I'm like,
Yep, not ready.
what the,
You got the
like,
you got the Sunday blues. You ever have the Sunday blues?
oh yeah. Or the Sunday scaries. I do the
The
Headspace
Sundays.
meditation app.
Yep,
Yeah, they
Sunday
call it the
scaries.
Sunday scaries where you're just like, "Oh, crap." Another
Yep.
week, another, whatever. And it feels that way a little bit, personally, professionally, like it is challenging. So you mentioned like four different parts to our energy: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So let's I think in order to understand, well, let's unpack it two ways. A, can you quickly just give me a rundown, a little bit more in depth of what those are, and then B, how do those affect us in terms of our ability to get energy, our ability to do more
Yeah.
work?
Yeah, I love this question. I think what I would ask our listeners to do is to imagine an upside down pyramid. Okay, like a funnel, like a
Yeah.
cone pointing downward. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and at the very bottom of that, we have go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And we
Yeah.
have just survival. We're just trying to stay alive. And by the way, if you really want to get a deep understanding of this, I would suggest reading Tony Schwartz's books, The Powerful Engagement and The Way We're Working Isn't Working, because
Yeah.
and Spark as well, because I think a lot of our understanding of how we manage our energy comes from those resources. Um, Also, just listen to Huberman like every time he drops one. Just do that too, right?
You're
He's
still
not
trying to
the
get them
end
on the
all be all,
podcast.
right? But like, yeah, I still haven't gotten past the alcohol podcast. Never drink it again until next weekend. Neither
Yeah,
here nor
sure.
there.
Right.
So we've got survival, right, at the bottom of that pyramid.
Yeah.
And then we have our body, we have our physical energy, right? And what we're trying to achieve with physical energy is sustainability, right? What we want is like a quality and a vitality so that we're fit and we're healthy to go expound energy, right?
Yeah.
To actually use the capacity that we have. And so we know that, like, okay, I'm well cared for, and because I'm
Right.
well cared for, I can go perform. Um, after the physical aspect of things, we have the emotional aspect of things, right? Which deals with like our deep and sincere need for security. So, do we have a quality of connections to people on an emotional level? Are we feeling loved and appreciated? And are we able to express those emotions in a clear way?
Mhm.
Because I think um, oftentimes uh, we can get the self right, or we can get the others part right, but to have both working in concert is becomes really difficult, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're physically exhausted. So far we've got survival, we've got physical, which is about sustainability, we've got emotions, which are about a sense of security, and next we have what most of us would go to immediately, which is our minds, right? When we're talking about energy, we're right. That's so much of what we think is like the ability to focus. And the mind is actually not just specificity of focus, but it's also duration of focus. Like what
Mm.
I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be able to get really tightly focused on one thing for a long period of time. Now that's relative. That may be 15 minutes, that may be 2 hours. It depends on the task at hand. But we want the energy that's available to do that. And then one thing further is each of us have unique desires that we want to apply that focus to. We have unique skill sets or passions. And so we have to have an awareness of what those are, which is
Mm.
why when we talk about the mental energy that we need, we're actually talking about self-expression.
Mhm.
We're talking about the ability to go put my unique skills to work in the world for a specific long period of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'll give you one more, which is the spiritual one. So this would be at the top of the funnel, right? And again, this is where the idea of energy can get real weird. We live close to Sedona, think vortex, right? We're not like think
Or
crystals
Yetis. Yeah.
or Yetis. We're not headed in that direction here, although there's something to be discussed there. I'm not denying that. What we're trying to do is just keep it really, really simple, right?
Mm.
Something that we could scale into an organization, which is the idea of significance or purpose. And we talk about that
Mm.
constantly on the Daily Leader, that we have to have clear values and a clear purpose. What we're after in life is a life that's full of meaning and intentionality.
Mm.
And so we've got physical, emotional, mental, and then finally the top of that being spiritual. And that's all assuming that we've had our material needs met, right? That
Yeah.
we're actually fed, clothed, and hydrated.
So are you saying that my exponentially will grow kind of exponentially as I move through that funnel? Is that kind of the
That's
idea
exactly
that
right.
like, okay,
Yep.
as my basic needs are met, so
And
A, am I
and
safe?
yep,
Oh, go
and
for it.
good personal and organizational hygiene is that I'm not so focused on one that I'm negligent of the others,
Mm, talk about that. What do you
right?
mean?
Because my tendency, Taylor, is, we've talked about this before. Like I love to work. I
Yeah.
love the feeling of productivity. I really, really want to get to the end of the day and kind of collapse on the living room floor with my wife and my kids and wrestle and play and read books, and just it's all left on the table that day,
Yeah.
right? And that's great. But the problem with that lifestyle is that it doesn't adequately respect like the renewal needs of each of these types of energy, right? Like
Mm.
you can't just put out for 12, 16 hours a day and expect the body, the emotions, the mind, and the spirit to just be ready to turn on and run at full RPMs the next day. That it's just not
Yeah.
enough. As
Yeah.
human beings, we need way more rest than we think we need, especially in modern society. And we
Yeah.
have to do that in a way that's honoring to the demands of these four types of energy, maybe not just to my favorite, not just the one that I like the most,
Mm.
right? So
That's good.
imagine, for example, being an athlete, but never taking the time to center on the spiritual aspects of your life,
Yeah.
right? Imagine being a business person, but never really taking care of the quality of your emotional connections,
Mm.
right? You're ultimately going to create some headwinds for yourself if you don't balance out how you renew your energy.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You're going to run in one direction really hard and just kind of burn out.
And
Yeah.
I think too, I'm really curious how you feel about this. Like there are different ways that we might go about trying to renew our energy. And
Yeah.
and I think that there are some that are better than others.
Sure.
So I'm curious, like how like what's been
No,
your journey? What's been your journey trying to get more energy out of life?
man, yeah, I mean, all this is super fascinating to me. I think that it is the tension between rest and energy is an interesting concept because, especially in America, we live in a go 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 society, and I think even when we're resting, it may not be restful. Like even
Mhm.
when we are taking time away from our profession, the play that we're doing, I'm gonna stick with my pastoral side and go with all of my acronyms, but the play is not necessarily always giving back, or the time off is not giving back to that tank, right? So we talk about if you looked at it in terms of healthy things that energize us, right? And then lower things that kind of like take away. So healthy ideas are, eating well, playing, laughing, taking breaks, getting enough sleep, doing all those kind of things. A lot of times my restful time is spent doing the things that actually pull me away, that are lower octane stuff, right? So
Yeah.
it's alcohol, going out for drinks with friends, overeating because I hit the weekend and I'm like, heck yeah, I'm gonna have 3 In-N-Out burgers.
Cheese ball.
Television, yeah. I just want to veg out. Have an extra 2 or 3 cups of coffee. I'm gonna have that sugar. I'm gonna like we do the things
Mhm.
that actually don't give us energy to keep going
Yep.
often, and I'm sure this may not be everybody, it's just my experience. Oftentimes I'm like, okay, great, well now I'm going to rest, and then I don't even think most of those things are bad things in themselves, right? But
Mhm.
most things taken to excess become things that actually are withdrawing rather than giving back to us. So we get back to Monday, right? And our basic needs are not met, let alone our hygiene of how is our mental side and our spiritual side and all those other things going.
Yep.
So
Totally
oftentimes
agree.
I think that like the pyramid is super fascinating because as you right go up or down on the pyramid depending on which way it is. Okay, we're all most of us live in America. Our basic needs are met,
Oh
and
yeah.
most places around the world in 2025, like your basic needs right are met. So then we're talking emotional and safety, and are
Mhm.
we getting enough physical rest? Again, oftentimes yes, we're going to sleep in, maybe even get too much, which you can look into a lot of data on sleep, and go
That's right.
okay, I can probably get too much sleep or too little sleep. So here's the deal, Brad, and you and I talked about this before. I'm going to throw it to you and then you can throw it back if you want. Why, in your opinion, do I tend to gravitate towards things that take my energy when I want to rest?
Yeah.
So when I want to rest and renew,
Yeah.
why do I gravitate towards, you know, alcohol, overeating, vegging out on TV, having extra caffeine, all those things?
Yeah. This is a really good question. And another way of framing it would be for me, I I use this question a lot is like why do I what payoff do I get from my bad habits?
Yeah.
Right? Let's go back to some of our training around the three laws of performance um and think through why am I benefiting? What is the perceived value in me choosing these low thought, low intensity, highly passive ways of quote unquote rest,
Mhm.
as opposed to like, hey, I'm going to go on a walk. I'm going to put some music on, right? I'm going to wear a tank top and get some sun, right? I gravitate towards just sort of collapse, what I call collapse, right?
Yeah.
I swing into overwork or what I would call like a toil, and then the
Yeah.
pendulum swings back to a form of collapse. So I get to the
Yeah.
end of my day or my night, I pour myself a whiskey, and I watch. We just got done watching Travelers on Netflix. Super weird show, and I basically binge watched it for like a week, right? And I'm like, huh, I feel worse I feel worse now, right?
Mm,
So I think that I choose that because I have over indexed into work in the first place. I've actually um I've dispersed and I've put out more energy than what I should have in the first place. And I I don't want to put the thought and the intentionality into eating a healthy snack. And do you know what I mean? Like I've
yeah,
overdone it. And so
yeah,
because I've overdone it, I no longer have the energy to be thoughtful about my rest and my renewal.
yeah,
And so how do I actually begin to build margin in my schedule so that number one, I'm not overdoing it. And if I overdo it, I'm limiting the bad options that I have, right? So one of the things that I've changed is like I'm on decaf, right? Which for me, like you know me well enough to know that like uh
hmm
uh this is a massive deal for me because I've for the last, probably 8 or 9 years since I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, I've propped myself up with caffeine like pretty heavily to the point where I'm like, hey, I'm 32 ounces of coffee a day, which is a little too much. I mean, it's not like
hmm
I'm not going to like, keel over. I'm not going to like stroke out from that much coffee,
yeah,
but I'm most certainly not like helping my body. Right. So to go to decaf for me is a move towards healthy energy renewal and moving away from those kinds of low value, dirty fuel styles of renewal, like we talked about with Justin Benson. So that's my thought on that. Do you have any? I don't know how clear that was, or if you'd add or
yeah.
maybe
That's
delete
good.
there,
I
but
I I think the challenge is how often do we actually renew our energy? It's not. You talked about it in a fascinating way, and it was exactly where I was going, which is this idea that like it's like if you went to college, which you did, and you study really hard for midterms, right? And you don't sleep, you don't do anything, and then when you come home, you crash. Like, and I just remember coming home and like you just want to go hang out with your friends, and you're like, man, now I'm sick, I'm exhausted, I need to sleep for like a week. So much energy was used to get there that when you get to the spot that you actually wanted, you didn't get to do the things that you wanted to do as much, right? And I think oftentimes, at least that's the way that I feel. I get to Friday and it's like, oh God, I finally made it. But
Mhm.
then we give in to, our devices or our things that, like,
Oh
done
yeah,
in small portions can be totally fine, but done to excess are actually going to drain us and
right.
not restore us.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. A little bit of caffeine, wonderful, right? A beer with
yeah,
a friend, that's great. Surfing, your social media channels, that's awesome, right?
yeah,
But when we start talking about, using things like pornography, like binge watching, shows that are really low value and don't
yeah,
really mean anything to us, or you know engaging in like excessive alcohol use, like overeating unhealthy foods, like those things are so damaging, right? um, and oftentimes we don't see the damage in the short term. Maybe with alcohol we do, just because it's so like literally poison. But with the other things, we might not see negative consequences for weeks, months, or years.
right.
And so we really have this long sort of this perceived long um, tail on the consequences of all those things. But I do think that they sneak up on us, and they come quickly once they do come. And so yeah, I'm totally with you that what we have to do is we have to manage our energy more carefully so that we have the energy to choose healthy renewal and
Right.
not these kinds of numb, um, or in the case of like caffeine and sugar, like really high spike styles of
Sure.
renewal.
Yeah, I kind of see it as like we kind of think, hey, we're it's like we have our cell phone and we're going to try and run all the way to the end of the week, and the battery's going to go to zero, and then we're going to plug it in on the weekend, and yet the battery that we're plugging it into is super weak because there's no intentionality to it, right?
Yeah.
It's all these things that don't actually give us the energy that we want, they are more just an escape. And
Mhm.
escape does not give you escape is not bad, but escape done to excess can
Oh, yeah.
be very damaging, right? So escape,
Yeah.
I want to hang out with my friends and be intentional, awesome. Escape, I'm going to get obliterated this weekend, drinking 18 beers, and then I'm going to have a headache the next day, and I can see that the energy's not there. So
Yeah.
Brad, I want to pivot real quick, and I want to talk about, okay, so if the answer to more energy is moving through that pyramid and
Mhm.
doing that on a consistent basis, how do I start to do that during my week so that when I get to,
Yep.
A, my days, but B, my weekend, then my weekend can actually be restorative? Like, I think you got to get to Friday and not be dead. Not that sometimes that's not going to
That's
happen
right.
and you can feel really accomplished. But if you can do that, then I think that the weekend actually becomes more restorative. So,
Yep.
quickly help our listeners know what are some really practical things or practicality corner that we can do to build some margins into our week to think about renewing our energy consistently.
Well, first and foremost, it's awareness, right? To be
Mm,
able to have the language around the 4 types of energy is really powerful because
yeah,
it's a quick way for you to measure how am I doing physically, emotionally, mental, and spiritually,
yeah,
right? And again, when we talk about the spirituality aspect, I just want to remind our listeners that we're talking about the sense of significance and purpose that you feel, right? And not to be confused with your emotions, right? Because that's a different sort of conversation. But the awareness that those 4 categories exist is step number 1. And then I would say a few key questions around each one of those types of energy. So just for example, like checking in with yourself on Wednesday morning and just asking yourself like, how do I feel today? How do I
yeah,
feel physically? Am I feeling like I'm not getting enough sleep so far this week? How do I feel when I look at my meeting schedule today? I think meetings are typically pretty draining for people, especially because most of them aren't done well, as we
right.
know, right?
Yeah,
Like,
which we'll
like
talk about on another podcast.
yeah, we will. In fact, I really we need to have Nathan Gadosic come talk about it. It's like an area that he's focusing on a ton in his business right
Yeah,
now.
cool.
So we need
Great.
to invite him back. But what what we have to do is just ask ourselves, look, how is my energy in these categories, and what do I need to renew some of this energy? So for example, like we've been talking about, physical energy, but let's talk about emotional for a second, right? If we really want to be in the performance zone emotionally, we have to have a high sense of security and positive emotions. So a high sense of security and a positive outlook mean that we can perform. So you're going to feel things like a sense of calm. You're going to be optimistic. You're going to have a sense of like, I'm challenged, but I'm not experiencing an unhealthy level of stress and panic, right? Um, and you're going to feel more invigorated and vital emotionally
Sure.
when you're in a healthy spot, right? So those are just some words that like you can pull, like, do I feel these things? And if I don't, then probably what I need to do is like call a friend, call my spouse, just check in and hear how's your day going. Get your
Yeah,
mind off of your problems, right?
yeah,
Who's that sick friend, right? Go on a walk with your dog. Go play with your dog. Go play fetch, right?
yeah.
Whatever it is. And so that's one example of, you know, using questions and looking inward. I think one of the things that you've pointed our listeners to many times is like the power of writing your thoughts in a journal or notebook. Um, and particularly like thoughts about gratitude, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, Tony Robbins, I'm gonna brag on him for a minute. You may have different opinions on him, think whatever, but he said something really good. He goes, "Hey, um, most of us have, we all wire our brains. We talk about this a lot on the podcast. How is our brain wired?" And he says, most of us have dirt roads to or paths to gratitude and highways to fear and anger. And so he says, "Hey, I choose to rewire my brain every day. And the way he does it is kind of this emotional check-in that you're talking about. He goes, I actually listen, and you could do this at any point. I think he does it right in the morning. He goes, I listen to a pump up song for about 3 minutes. He goes, this whole thing is going to take about 10 minutes. He goes, I listen to a pump up song for about 3 minutes, get myself really psyched kind of for the day, connected with his vision, whatever he does. And then he goes, and then I spend 3 minutes in gratitude, right? So he's going to get really grateful and focus on that. And then 3 more minutes kind of thinking about and praying for those around him in his life. And I thought, man, what a good exercise to be able to do anytime that I am aware that maybe my energy is depleted. Cool. Throw on that song, little Eminem getting you pumped up in the corner or whatever it is, you know, get really grateful for what's going on and then get outside of yourself. Here's the number one thing that I've been learning about my energy. Oftentimes, so when my basic needs are met, like I've actually slept more than 3 hours because my twins are sleeping, and there's at least enough money coming in, or I can put it on the credit card or whatever. Um, my emotional state, my emotional state usually gets more depressed when I'm focusing on self. When I
Yes.
focus on others, when I can
Yes.
turn that, this brings me all the way back to leadership and self deception.
Yeah, I love it.
Here's the thing:
Yep.
when we're in the box, go read the book. You got to figure it out. We'll do a whole session on the box. But when you're in the box, your energy gets depleted really fast because you're only thinking about you. And the way
Mhm.
we are hardwired, they say that it's better to give than it is to receive. The reason is actually you win because I give to you, and I win because I'm giving to you, and it restores me.
That's right.
So yes, I think that's super practical, Brad, to go, okay, great. If these base level needs are met, I'm getting enough sleep. Okay. Sometimes that's not always going to happen and I'm safe. Now, emotionally, how am I going to be doing? Right.
Mhm.
Well, if you're out of whack, which is what happens, take a break. I think you can hardwire your day to go, I strategically plan in 2 or 3 times to just take a break, step away. And
Yep.
we'll do a whole other one on practical ways to continue to renew your energy. But and then focus on gratitude, focus on other people, focus on things outside of myself, and then connect back with your purpose, right? Get you
Mhm.
all the way back there. And if you
Yeah.
don't know your purpose yet, we're doing a workshop on purpose, another workshop podcast that we'll do talking about purpose specifically, because everybody that's come on our podcast talks about the
Yep.
significance of that. And again, I think it's easier said than it is done. So um
I think that this is a really interesting observation. You referenced the obstacle is the way a lot, right? Which is a book by Ryan Holiday where
yeah.
he's leveraging some of the meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And when we're talking about mental and spiritual energy, particularly, I like to say that for mental energy, the obstacle is you, right? The obstacle is me,
Mm,
right?
yep.
When I'm drained and unable to focus my mental energy, like, and what do I mean by that? I mean that I'm distracted and potentially that I have a wide sort of aperture, like I can't stay locked in on one thing, right? So when we get to this sort of tactical zone, right, I can narrow my focus down and I can be fully absorbed in something, right? Then what have I done? I've taken my problems, I've taken my issues, I've taken the concerns, right? We're spilling over maybe into some emotional lack of security in this moment. But I can use my logic, I can be analytical, I can be task oriented, I can be precise and methodological, right? And it's because I've removed the obstacle of me. I've taken my focus off of what's distracting me and I've put it onto this external thing. And then when it relates to the obstacle is the way, from a spiritual standpoint, we recognize that the way out is through, and that if I'm going to actually be able to remove the obstacle of me, then I have to deal with, from a spiritual standpoint, the problems that I'm facing, which
Mm,
means I have to go back to my source of inspiration. I have to go back to an abundance mindset that says, like, hey, I'm not dying, even though my brain might feel like I am, but that everything that's in my way, everything that feels like a problem is actually an opportunity for growth.
mm.
And so, I'd love to hear your commentary as we close up and
Yeah.
think through, like, man, I know that that book has been meaningful to you. I know that that phrase is something that you've latched onto and leveraged in a lot of
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah.
And I think that there's this deep connection between our mental energy and our spiritual energy when we think about the obstacle being me and the obstacle being the way.
Yeah. Yeah. The obstacle is always me. Like, if you want more energy, the problem resides with you and the answer resides with you. The cool part about the problem residing with you is you can change that, right? Which is the whole premise of the obstacle of the way. If I am the problem to my own energy problem, then I can solve that problem. I
Yeah.
can change it. I can move that needle. So, yes, if I'm a person that's going, hey, I'm listening to this podcast because my capacity to do work or my energy feels hindered, it doesn't feel like what I want it to, then you have the ability to change that. You have the ability to go, the answer probably does reside with me. If you want to get, y- yes, it could be sleep. Yes, it could be a number of things. Yes, if you are clinically depressed, we do want you to, hey, go talk with somebody, go meet with a mental health professional. All those things are true. And the fastest, best way to get your energy back is to, like Brad said, get aware of where am I lacking, and you're probably lacking in all of them, and then decide what you're intentionally going to do. And I say this all the time. This is my favorite recovery phrase. It's actually simple. It's just not easy.
That's right.
Look, all of you, it's like character. Character takes an entire lifetime to build, and one decision to blow it all up. I can be really faithful to my spouse for a long time, cheat once, and I've blown up and done a lot of damage. Life is the same way. The easier options to restore energy only restore it for a quick moment and then are fleeting. The long-term solution to it is going to be is going to be more challenging. It is more challenging to be grateful, to journal, to do all those kind of things, and it is going to be what sustains you. It is going to be what gets you to where you want to go. So, if you want to continue to have an energy problem, I encourage you keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, that's good.
But if you'd like to change, then you can realize that if you always do what you've always done, then you always get what you've always got.
Mhm.
So something has to change. And if you're going, okay, cool. Maybe I don't want that. I encourage you, go back to about minute 10 here when Brad starts talking about all these things and listen to it again and decide you can build in the capacity to change your ability to connect with your energy. Like you can do it. You can
That's
do
right.
it. You can have more energy than you've ever had. And you don't actually have to change that much, but you can just be intentional and aware. And I think you'd be surprised. So, Brad, I think we should land this plane. It's morning for us. I don't know what time you're listening to it. You got your
Cheers. Cheers to
cheers.
decaf.
Hey, come back, listen to us again on the Daily Leader, and we will be excited to connect again soon.